Okay, so good evening, everybody, and welcome to our webinar series. Tonight, we have Dealing with Conflict as a Referee. My name is Claire Dowdall, and I'm the National Referee and Player Development Officer. And with me, we have Stephen McNulty. Stephen is an ex-national referee. He's refereed all over the world, as well as in Ireland. He is originally from Tyrone and is currently living in Wicklow and doing all things football down in Wicklow. He's also one of our tutors and brings a lot of practical experience to this evening's workshop. So you want to say hello there, Stephen?
Hi, everyone. Hopefully we can deal with your questions tonight and you go away feeling a lot more confident after tonight's presentation. But don't be afraid to ask anything. No such thing as a stupid question. You might get a stupid answer, but not a stupid question.
Yeah, folks. So as we said, we will be trying to keep it interactive for you. And feel free to ask any questions along the way. And hopefully we all have a bit of learning. So what are the aims tonight? We're just going to cover what conflict is. Some important things like recognizing conflict. So maybe trying to stop it off its source before it gets on your way. And the big thing for me, and I think Stephen's a firm believer in it, is communication. Sometimes your communication is the best way of dealing with all forms of conflict and then dealing with conflict. So that's what we're going to run off tonight's agenda. So just to get you started and get you thinking straight away, I'm going to stick a poll up and I want you to answer. And the question's really easy. Who do you think a referee has the most conflict with? So if you're a referee yourself, who do you think they have the most conflict with? Is it the players, coach, supporters, or others? I'll give you a few seconds to answer. They're coming in thick and fast. Just hopefully there'll be buttons in front of you and you can click away. Let's give you 5 more seconds. 3, 2, and 1.
So overwhelmingly the coach.
You can see that, Stephen. That's probably what we're going to deal with a good bit tonight then. Yeah. If it links in around that. People's experience with conflict then is mostly, as you can see, they're around the coach, which is coming out at 63%. And from your experience, Stephen, refereeing, would you feel that's quite accurate?
Yeah, I would. I suppose, and it's probably the one that's closer to you as well. Whereas the supporters are in the stand, you know, it's easier to switch off from that. But as you know, the coach is always going to be there. You know, steps. You know, there's 2 teams referee. You know, everything like that, and it would be the coach. And as we'll cover off, we'll know the reasons why it is the coach. You know, as we go on through the slides.
I think we know that. And what we have here next in our second wee poll for you, is the answer to us is, what do you think is the most common reason for conflict? So out of your own maybe experience or just even your thought, you know, is it a referee's mistakes? Is it team's frustration? Is it lack of rule knowledge? Or is it just misunderstandings? I think this will be an interesting one. Let's give you another 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And you can see there are people's thoughts on this as well. We've got coming in here lack of rule knowledge at 63%, and team frustration 32%, and the misunderstanding 5%. Quite telling to see that nobody went with the referee's mistake. What do you think the most common conflict is? You know, if you've seen some of them clips around social media, I think at the weekend, you really think,
yeah, I was just saying that. I mean, we're you know, we do make mistakes, and we don't make them intentionally, but we do make mistakes, and it could be because we get blindsided, or you know, we just reacted too quickly to something and we didn't let it develop. But you know, I think, you know, we're not all perfect, and I think referees' mistakes should be a percentage of that. But I think we would all agree it is usually a lack of rule knowledge regarding the non-deliberate contact, you know, the tackle on the ball, open hand, you know, playing the ball on the ground, etc. You know, all those type of things, you know.
The charging, the tackle, you know, the common that real lack of knowledge, even the likes of now, the noting, you know, people just don't really know the in and out details. So I would agree, definitely a lack of real knowledge can be a huge instrument. of it all and a huge cause of conflict throughout it. So I just like to start with definitions in my webinars anyway. So if you look at the dictionary, what is conflict? An active disagreement between people with opposing opinions or principles. That's really conflict. One person thinks one thing, somebody thinks something completely different, and they haven't found out a way to solve it yet. So there's conflict and tension there. Conflict in sport, so regarding you as a referee in sporting teams, is usually a difference of opinions between the officials and the mentors, the players, the spectators, or the administrators, because you have to have somebody to have conflict with. And usually, unfortunately, the referee or the officials, that could be a lines person or umpire, tend to get the brunt of it. More so often, it's probably the most common one. But again, it's that difference of opinion. So we're going to just get started. And I want you to shout to us in the chat. So using the chat function, what words come to your mind do you associate with conflict? So we are saying conflict to you here now. What's the first word that comes to your mind regarding conflict? You can just throw it in the chat. I'll give you a couple of minutes. Very good. Aggression, anger, different opinions. Shouting, verbal.
Tone, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Frustration. Some really good ones. For you, Stephen, what comes to your mind? Annoyance.
I think constant. You know, you have no problem someone challenging you or questioning a decision or a non-decision, but when it's repetitive and constant, then to me, that's when the conflict starts then.
Yeah, shouting at a ref all the time. Feeling of injustice, ignorance. So yeah, full grasp of them there, and a lot of them. And you can just see it there. Some key words we can associate with conflict. Everybody's going to have so many, and you can see it there. Anger, angry, dramatic, disturbing. You know, you'll pick out 3 or 4 that you think of all the time. Stressed is a conflict due to stress. You know, somebody's just blew the lid for absolutely nothing. Problems, some things around conflict. Sometimes when I think of conflict, one of the big things I think of is solution. Honestly, I think, you know, okay, there was conflict there. What's the solution? Because we can't keep going on in this matter. So how can we solve it? And we mightn't always be able to solve it, but can we put things in a strategy in place to sort of make sure that that same conflict doesn't happen again, or that it reduces the matter of conflict? So it's definitely a key word that I always go to is sort of solution. You know, resolve. How can we sort of stop this conflict from taking over the game? Especially regarding you as the referee. The last thing, it's not enjoyable. If you're out there, and somebody said it in the question when we asked them a word, somebody shouting at a referee the whole game, that's not enjoyable. You come off the pitch after the hour and 10, 15 minutes, probably been working all day, might have rushed your dinner or haven't had your dinner, and you've listened to that, and you wonder sometimes, why am I refereeing? So you're looking at, is there strategies you can put in place to make it more enjoyable? And you're hoping that when conflict does occur, you deal with it in the right way, and hopefully you learn from it and, you know, come out stronger because of it.
And I think the opposite side of that is, as a referee, you have to try and avoid a lot of those words. You have to try and avoid anger. You've got to try and avoid aggression. You've got to try and avoid friction. You've got to try and avoid combat, and be more of the, you know, the resolution, the negotiation, the arbitration. That's where you need to be, rather than you need to be more on the green and the blue than on the red.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of your jobs and your roles. So what we want to do here before we go over some sort of conflict scenarios is just to have a feel of you from you. What type of conflict do you think a referee will face? So what, from your own experiences or looking into the future, or from what you've seen, what type of conflict will a referee face? and then hopefully we'll cover some of them scenarios in and around it. Is it over the line or not? So conflict over rules.
Again, another one regarding rules.
Yeah. Challenging decisions, steps. We all hear steps. Oh, steps is one of the favorite words in the dictionary, I think.
2 teams.
2 teams, ref. Yeah. Verbal abuse, name calling to a ref. So what you're talking here, I suppose, when they all come out, you're going very rule wise, which is grand. But that really means that's the type of conflict that is verbal abuse, basically, or somebody disagreeing with your playing rules. More than likely, either the coach or the player. So we're going to run over a couple of these. And again, feel free to ask questions or stick in the chat as we go. So I'm going to, one of the main areas of conflict that a referee or an official, it could be a sideline official or somebody that's involved in your team, comes across is conflict with the manager or the coach. And all them stuff you said, there are examples of that. The manager or the coach shouting steps, too long, ref, you haven't a clue what you're doing, etc., etc. So I'm just going to throw over to Stephen here and see, how would you deal with conflict between a coach or a manager? A coach has been shouting at you the whole game. They're going on say steps, that's not a foul, and it's constantly, and it's coming to the point now you feel you have to deal with it. So I don't know if you want to speak from experience or just let us know.
Well, I think you know, it's probably non-verbal communication and verbal communication. I think from the start of the game, it's always signal what the free kick is for or what the foul is for. You know, is it pulling? Is it chopping down on the arms? You know, always signal what the free is for, because frustration can build up on the sideline with what's that for? You know, that's the first thing you go, and what's that for, ref? Whereas if you're signaling and telling what the free is for, that takes one area of conflict away where they don't know what the free is for. Then the next part of the conflict may arise where they don't agree with you. So at least by signaling and telling at all time, and signaling and telling the players, and the supporters are also seeing what the reasons for, that takes one area away. The second one then is, if it's just constant conflict regarding your decisions, then that is 2 areas. One is either he or she is a complete idiot and they're going to always challenge every decision that goes or doesn't go their way, or they haven't a clue about the rules. So sometimes it'll be a bit of both. So I think you know, you have to let them challenge you at the start, but if it continues and it starts affecting the game, i.e. players are now challenging you, then that's when you go and nip it on the bud and you go over to the Mirfrinya or the Banisher or the physio, whoever is on the sideline, and you ask them that they tone down their shouting and tell them that if it's continued, that you will have to deal it from a disciplinary point of view, i.e. a card, a noting, or a report. That type of scenario with them. If it continues, then that's where you bring in what I would call an arbitrator. And usually I would always look for the flow, the mammy of the team, the female liaison officer. If they have one, they should have one on the rule. If they have one, I would always see that person as the arbitrator, and I bring them in, because I find women on the sideline have a lot more common sense than men on the sideline, and bring that flow in and say, look, these guys can't speak to me this way. They can't speak to the players that way. Can you please tell them to tone it down? If not, I'm going to have to bring in discipline to deal with it, to deal with this matter. And if that doesn't, then eventually you have to, you know, go to the final scenario of pitting them outside the pitch for the rest of the game and reporting them accordingly. But like I say, at all times, signal, verbal and non-verbal, you know, communication can deal a lot with it, because usually go, what's that for? If you're signaling and telling them, then that deals with that issue.
And what about body language and tone, Stephen?
Well, I think, unfortunately, I find down here is coming from the north, my tone is a lot louder than anybody that's living in the 26 counties. And I find sometimes people can think I'm being aggressive to them when I'm not. So yeah, I'm very conscious of that I actually have to slow down and lower my voice when I'm talking to them, because if I raise my voice at all, they see it as aggressive manner, and then it's just going to be aggressive against aggressive. So it's, you know, a soft tone as much as possible, and also let them speak and listen to them. But at the same time, they must let you speak. So if they constantly interrupt you, you have to point out to them that, you know, sorry, I've let you speak, now let me speak. And if you don't let me speak, then I'm going to have to ask you to leave the pitch or in the dugout, etc. So
that's really good self-awareness. I think that's a tip any referee can have. You know, that's built up over time. You didn't obviously realize probably for a long time that your tone sounds one way, and for you it's normal. And I'm the same because I'm a minority too. And you have to be so careful, you know, all the time, because people just perceive it in a different way. And that's why we always have to do that wee bit of self-reflection and looking back and going, God, maybe that somebody takes something up a completely different way when you're talking around tone. And that's why your non-verbal cues are so important, that they sort of take over from the verbal as well. And the last wee point I will ask you on it, Stephen, is, and this is it always comes into me all the time, would you go to the coach that's giving you maybe the hassle, or will you call them out onto the pitch to you?
Oh no, I would always go to them. No, it's never you come here to me. No, you know, you go to them. You know, if you're saying you come to them, you're chastising them in public, and right away they're going to get their back up. So they're already annoyed. So from the, you know, coming from the resolution part or the arbitration part, you definitely go to them, because if you bring them out to the middle of the field, and the same with dealing with a player as well. Come here, number 4, come up to me. You make them come the 10 steps. You're chastising them, and right away you're putting a bit of fuel on the fire that you don't need.
Putting the backs up. Brilliant. Yeah, that's perfect. Hopefully everybody has got tipped a few tips from that. Any comments, let us know. Another piece of something that a referee has to deal with quite often is referee fair player. So that's in terms, and again, 2 situations, if you want to talk about them both, Stephen, is when a player is starting to mouth back at the referee for all their decisions. Oh, you didn't give that to the other team ref. Oh, you're a joke ref. You know, we've all heard it. And then the second one is when a referee's having to deal with a player due to their misbehavior, in terms of they've created a red card offence and you're having to go to the book. So what's the sort of conflict in and around them both areas?
Well, again, I think it's, again, you know, going back to when she is fouling, that you tell her why she is fouling. And number 2, that's a tick. Number 2, that's your second tick. Number 2, if you continue to foul like that, you're going to end up in the sin bin. So again, it's always about awareness and, you know, telling them that, you know, if you continue, this is going to happen. Again, number 6 could be the captain, and you could be saying, look, 6, I've spoken to her 4 times, and, you know, she is tackling an aggressive behavior. And unfortunately, that was a deliberate charge, or that was a deliberate high tackle. And we, you know, within our rule, we can't tolerate that on the pitch. If I saw someone getting annoyed, you know, maybe she feels she's not getting her freeze, that she's being fouled, and you could see this aggression is going to turn around where she's going to make a silly foul and end up giving a yellow or a red. I would tell her, look, number 2, yes, I understand you're being fouled, but you've got your free and the player is being ticked. I would also try to look around, see who's close to her, who has a bit of common sense, or the captain will say, look, have a word with number 2, because she is getting her freeze and I am taking the opposition. And if she continues like that, she's actually going to end up getting penalised rather than the player that's fouling her. So again, just more awareness from yourself to try and avoid a potential clash further on.
And Stephen, would you have practiced, or does it come with experience? I suppose what I'm saying is, when you can see a player bubbling and you as the referee can see it bubbling, any strategies or warning signs of what to look out for, or when to step in to try and diffuse it before it gets to that point, you know, even in terms of maybe 2 girls niggling at each other and you think, oh, this is going to end in a eye, or, you know.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, maybe it's a parenting skill. You know, it's you know, you can see someone winding someone up, and you say, look, nip it on the bud as early as possible, and you know, talk to them. But you don't have to stop the game, and you don't have to tick them. Just when you're running past, say number 6 and number 11, come on, act like adults. You continue like that, I'm going to actually penalize you. And you've done it when no one else knows. You know, again, it's that chastising in public. You don't necessarily have to chastise in public. You just have to have that little quiet word in their ear. And
There's
I
a
think
lot of things that can be done even, and sometimes you'd say with a look, you know.
yeah, absolutely. Or look, running past and look at them, say, look, number 2, I know what you're at. Continue with it, and you won't stay on the pitch. And it's only between you and number 2. No one else needs to know.
No, they're definitely, if you can sort of try and nip things early, I find it sort of helps you in the long run, and that's the key. And I think it comes with, you would probably agree, Stephen, it comes with match experience.
Oh, it does. And, you know, you get to know that with that experience, you get to know the teams. You know that number 2 is a wind-up merchant, or that number 15 is a wind-up merchant, and you know, and you're aware of it. So, you know, it's repetitive behavior, and when you see that repetitive behavior, that experience helps you deal with it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely one that happens, and it probably leads us into this one that we were talking about, player feed player. Like, there is conflict, and it's up to the referee to deal with that, and that's what we were just speaking about. Whether it's winding players up, whether it's striking out, whether it's with your own team, or you know, a teammate that fell out, or they're shouting off to a coach, or they're 2 and 14 are at each other the whole game, or there's a bit of diving and feigning and pulling and pushing, and you know, that's still the conflict isn't actually between the referee, but it's definitely the referee's responsibility to try and diffuse it, and if needs be, punish it.
And that's where the arbitration comes in. You know, the arbitration board, you know, you're the arbiter between the 2 players. You know, you're the referee in the ring as such. You know, you're there to ensure that, you know, that they abide the rules. And again, it's that quiet word, and say, look, girls, if you continue, you will go into my book. And, you know, the more often your number goes into my book, then the bigger chance you have going to be spending 10 minutes on the sideline. And again,
would you use your officials a lot for this, like your umpires, your...
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, I would say, guys, look, keep an eye on 2 and 15 there. I think they're up to something. Or they would say to me, Stephen, 2 and 15 are at it. You know, we've warned them. We've already spoken to them. So the next time it's a tick. So, and I would say that to the lads, you know, we would divide the pitch into 4 quarters. And, you know, the 2 at the far end would take the right quarter and the left quarter, and the same at the top end. And they would deal with the issues in that quarter. And they mightn't be able to get a message out to number 5. So what they'll do, they'll use the goalkeeper and say, look, tell your number 5 that if it continues to keep pulling number 12 off the ball, we'll be telling the referee, and the referee will be taking number 5. So again, it's just that message to, you know, it's trying to avoid a situation erupting. And when you eventually go in to tick them, they've had their warnings, you know.
It's about, as always, keeping on top of the communication. And we're just going to open up before we talk about this one, because this is one that sometimes happens, and it's always horrible when it does. You on the call now as referee or officials, if you were the referee, how would you handle conflict with the spectators? So you're refereeing a game, maybe the game doesn't go your way, or there's a decision you believe is right, the home team isn't happy, the spectators are starting to shout abuse, they might be coming onto the pitch, referee, you're a joke, you know, you're ref in that game. How would you deal with that? If you want to throw any ideas of it into the chat, that would be great. Hopefully it hasn't happened to too many.
So at the end of the game, there was a contentious issue, and a couple of supporters approached you what do you do?
Come on, don't be shy. Take it in, even a couple of words. Has it ever happened to you, Stephen?
Yeah, it has, but nothing serious. It actually, again, it's all down to, you know, trying to avoid that situation. I'll give you an example. It was on the GAA code last year, and I was umpiring for a friend of mine who referees both codes, and the game went to a penalty shootout. And he said to me afterwards, before the penalty shootout, we'll toss for it. And I says, no, you're not. For which goal we kick into. I says, we'll take the top goal, which is beside the exit gate, which is next to the changing room. And he said, why? And I says, because if this gets contentious and we're in the bottom goal, we have 140 meters to walk to the changing room. Whereas we have 20 meters to walk to the changing room by taking the top goal. So it's being aware of your surroundings and saying, Jesus, yeah, if we do walk 440 meters, there is a chance supporters will get to us before we get to the changing room. So it's just be aware of your situation and be aware of the surroundings and how you want to get as quickly off the pitch.
Really simple point, but a really effective point. Knowing where you are and getting off the pitch, and you can see it here. People are saying stay away from them and try not to engage with them. Keep walking and don't comment back. I would go and ask for names and tell them that they will go on referee's report if they don't cease immediately. Try to get off the pitch as quickly as possible. Don't engage with them. Stay calm. Leave the pitch area as soon as possible, but take notice of all that's being said for your report later. Steer clear of them, but be polite if you're one-on-one. To be honest, I try and avoid it as much as sometimes trying to talk to a small group can encourage others to join in. Yeah, I would completely agree with that. What's your thoughts on that, Stephen? I think we would always say get off the pitch. You know, you're never going to calm these people down.
Don't engage at all, because it doesn't matter what you're going to say. Whatever you say, they're not going to agree with, because they feel an injustice has happened to them and their players and their team. So it doesn't matter what you say, you cannot change how they think. We had a situation too when I was doing umpire as well. It was a Leinster club final in Kinnegad, and referee had a red card about 10 minutes to go, and the team that got the red card lost. But I could sense around the pitch the aggression in the supporters. And when you go to Kinnegad, you have to walk through the stand to get to the changing room. And the referee was about to walk off the pitch, and I called him back, and I says no. And I called the 2 lines person in, and I called the other 3 umpires in, and the 7 of us walked off together. Now, we were abused and came to me, and one guy actually bounced off my shoulder because I sort of turned around to keep the referee safe in the middle. But again, that was awareness. Like if John had to walk straight off himself, or a lines person had walked straight off themselves, they were walking technically into an angry mob. But again, it was the 7 of us, safety in numbers, moving through the crowd.
It was like getting into a lion's den. You just sense that it come up.
Yeah, and if you do have that sense, you know, if you do have that sense and awareness what's going on in the last 5 minutes, maybe try and position yourself that when you are going to blow the final whistle, that you are as close to the exit or changing room as possible. You know, don't be 120 meters away from the changing room when you're blowing that whistle. If you need to play 30 seconds more to get you up that side of the pitch, play 30 seconds more to get you up that side of the pitch. It's again just aware of what's going on in your surroundings. But you know, you will be aware. If you're not aware, you know, it's a key learning point you need to look at.
And what about in terms of reporting then, Stephen? How would you report maybe something that happened with the abuse of a spectator after?
Well, the abuse of the spectator, I would just say, you know, as I was leaving the pitch, I put it in Dakota, under the Dakota rules. I was leaving the pitch. I was accosted by four supporters from Club A. I knew they were from Club A because of the colours they were wearing. And, you know, they called me XYZ, reported word for word, or they called my umpires XYZ or my lines people XYZ. One of these people we noticed was wearing a cap and they had the initial BC on his top. So as much information as possible that you can give to the CODA team to actually bring the club in and say, well, we know it was one of your supporters' initials BC. So what's that? Because if you look here, a lot of people don't know this. Rule 18 of the official guide is each competing club shall be responsible for the conduct of its members and followers. So a club can't back out and say, oh, we don't know who they were. They'll say, well, CODA will say, sorry, produce them. If you don't produce them, then your secretary or chairperson will be responsible. And on that situation, John reported that issue, and the spectators actually came to the CODA meeting and the club was fined over it. Then again, we have dissenting or challenging the authority of a match official. That's a yellow card. Striking, threatening, using abusive language to or interfering with a match official is a red card. And if you do have to use these sanctions, please in your report word for word what happened. Just don't say number 7 struck my umpire with his fist, or her fist or whatever. Say exactly what actually happened. Word for word is much more detail. The more detail as possible, CODA can deal with it and stop it happening again, because that's what we want. We want the clubs to have a deterrent so it doesn't happen again with another club or with another referee.
Definitely, it's about that reporting piece, and I think that's what we always have to get into our head, and there's some rules in and around what we can do regarding being in touch with the rule book as referees or officials when something comes up. We are protected. So why does the conflict occur? We talked about different conflict scenarios there. A huge amount of it is a lack of respect for authority. It's just they don't care that the referees there, they've been trained that they're doing the job, so they believe they can say or do whatever they want. A big one is players always look to blame others for their own lack of success, and I would put coaches in with that as well. It's very hard at the time to sit back and reflect and go, well, look, I didn't do them extra runs, or I missed them gym sessions, or I just wasn't, I wasn't up to form today. It's much easier to say that referee kept giving a free against me. I wasn't overcarrying, and he said I overcarried the ball. At that time in the heat of the moment, players and coaches are going to look to blame somebody else before they've analysed their own game. Unfortunately, in Ireland, there's a culture and tradition that seems to be acceptable to criticise the referee. People would often say to me, and I think we've been in agreement, oh, you don't get that in rugby. It's because it's not stood for. Unfortunately, within the GAA and the Gaelic Games family, it seems to be fine. Nobody takes a hit. You're allowed to say what you want to a referee. It all seems to be a part of the way a game's played, which isn't right. And it's something that there needs to be a huge mind shift in and around. Sportsmanship is very quickly diminished. So sportsmanship goes out the window. Win at all costs comes in. Teams want to win, and they'll do anything, and they'll lie, and they'll cheat, and that's why the referee is so important to try and keep the integrity of the game in place. Anger, anger maybe over decision, or they believe that the referee has called something against them, or they're letting that team overcarry, but we can't overcarry. They can walk all day, or she's her hands on me, but when I push back, ref is not blowing, and it turns into levels of anger, and it just completely blows out. The other one is stress. Stress levels, especially from people today, are a lot higher with the way work has went with this, I think, COVID-19 and people being locked away in the house. It's two different types of effects on people. Either people are just delighted to be back out in the pitch again, or people are more anxious and there's more stress in around it. People are worried about protocols, and there can be conflict over, oh, she touched me, ref, or if somebody's coughing and they're going into panic, get off me. And there can be just huge amount of stress levels. Even getting to the game, how I did my health certification, and things just maybe aren't as simple and around. A big one, we've touched on it in all our scenarios, is an inability to communicate effectively. A lot of time conflict comes down to poor communication, whether that's verbal or non-verbal. The message hasn't got across, or it hasn't got across the way that you want it to get across. And it's caused this confusion or misunderstanding. And that's a huge amount of it. A lack of understanding regarding rules and regulations. And people want it and believe that they can question decisions. And I think that's fine. I would encourage referees to answer questions as long as they were asked in a suitable manner. I think listening and clarifying is one of the easiest ways out of conflict. And I think it's very funny. I got a phone call not that long ago on a Monday morning to say, oh, Claire, we were playing a game into a game, referee hasn't got a clue, named the referee. They did this, and I said, okay, that's the rule. And the person on the phone, who's a very good friend of mine, was gobsmacked. We're like, right, but we, yeah, that's not what we played in. And I said, no, I said, the referee who you're giving out about is completely in rule. They went on to ask me 3 different questions about 3 different decisions the referee made that day, and the referee was in rule for all 3. I mean, spot on, bang on the money. One was around extra time, one was around the noting, and it just, you're always thinking, so much conflict. That was somebody ringing me on the Monday morning to give out about this referee, and a complete lack of understanding for rules and regulations was the source of that conflict. Where I think if they had just maybe asked the question at the end of full time before extra time began, or at half time, the referee would have clarified that, and there mightn't have been the hard feelings that there was after the game. But it's always there in and around, especially that issue, I think.
Yeah, like I had a situation where Dublin County Senior County Final 2 years ago refereed and went the extra time, and the mentors came to me, and one team had a sin bin, and I explained that the player, was off the pitch for another 6 minutes. They could start with 15, but they would have used one of their extra subs.
Yeah.
And then if she comes back on after 6 minutes, that would be their second sub, and explained the ticks it carried and whatever. And the manager ran off, and the other manager says to me, he doesn't understand what you said. And I said, I can't make him understand. I can only explain the rules. Whatever he does with him after that is his call. I've explained the rules. I can't do any more than that.
It's funny, and that's literally, that's what it comes down to, an understanding of the rules. And if everybody understood them a bit better, I don't think we would have very much problems. Recognizing conflict, and I think this is important for referees, probably one of the most important things. There is warning signs a lot of the time, not every time, but there is warning signs that something might blow up. So you're always and should always be looking out for facial expressions and body language, the body language of the players, the coaches, the spectators. As Stephen made a great example, he felt the atmosphere. You can see the body language of people. They knew to surround the referee. The non-verbal signs, the disgust, the looks, the head shake, sometimes people, the shaking of the head, and the noises, the signs of aggression, and the repetitiveness in the comments that you can hear over and over and over, the same thing being harp, harp, harp. These are all signs of recognizing the conflict is probably in and around the corner, and they're warning signs for you of knowing what's coming next and how you can be prepared to deal with them. So planning for conflict. And I think this probably comes from our recognizing our conflict. You're going to have scenarios that happen in a game. You should have thought about them. And I would always recommend talk to a friend who knows the rules, who's a referee, and say, either this happened in my game this week, or what if this happens, like Stephen said, what happens if it goes the extra time and there's somebody who's been sin binned? What do I do if the other team don't understand that? What do I do if I send somebody off for 3 ticks and they're unaware of that? You're thinking of different things. What do I do if a player tells me to F off? What are my steps? What steps do I take? And that's the mental preparation that happens before you go onto the field of play. You've thought about these scenarios, what could happen. You think about how you would handle it, and you practice different situations of them happening. You talk through them. What 4 or 5 points would I do? So that when it does happen, it's an automatic response to you. You nearly don't have to think. And you've briefed your team of officials and your captains exactly what you expect and what you'll stand for and what you don't. That means everybody's really crystal clear in your communication. Stephen's already spoke about it. As he referees, he's saying to somebody, number 2, that's you ticked. I seen that number 2. That's your warning. Knock that in the head. The umpires told you you're pulling. You're constantly communicating in order to plan for making sure the conflict doesn't happen, because that's your biggest thing that you want to do. You want to try and get through a game with you having resolved all the conflict so that it never bubbles. As it bubbles, you wipe it out so it doesn't overflow and explode. Knowledge of participants. if you know what somebody's like, you know, you can nearly get on top of it early on, and understanding the context of the game. It's going to be, Stephen talked about a championship final. Look, it's going to be different, and pressure's going to be up there. The game means a lot more than maybe first round of the league. So you have to understand that intensity, and that every decision is more than likely going to start being questioned, especially if it's a thin margin, if it's a 5-point game, if you're talking about 10 minutes to go and both teams are level on 1-5 apiece. You know, the contents of that game and the decisions and people's reactions are going to be far more extreme than in the first minute of the game. And a big thing I would say is don't take things to heart. At the time you as the official or the referee, you're on that pitch trying your best to referee the game. That's what all you're thinking of. You're trying to be as fair as possible because you only see the play. If you're refereeing well and at a good level, you're only refereeing the next play, the next decision. The players are going for glory, for the cup. The managers are the same. They only see it through their eyes, where you as the referee are in a brilliant position to see it from the bigger picture. So about, you know, Stephen, how have you planned for conflict before in the past? Or
well, I think a lot of it is, as you say, you know, a lot of it is it's mental in your body. You know, if you're refereeing a game at 7:30 on a Wednesday night, you're going to be at work most of the day. So it's, you know, it's hydrating, it's having, you know, a good lunch, because you're not going to be eating after come 5 o'clock. So it's, you know, what you don't want to be doing is you don't want to be going to that game tired, because if you're tired, you're going to have a short fuse, and you're not going to tolerate the way you would tolerate a game if you weren't tired. A game, if you have a game at 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning, that means not being in the pub to 12 o'clock, because again, you have to go out mentally prepared and be prepared for these challenges. And if you've got a slight headache or a hangover, or you haven't slept well, you're not going to be, you know, open-minded enough to deal with that potential conflict. So it's a lot of it's down to preparation. And again, if it's, again, knowledge of participants, then that's when you have the word of the start. Say, look, lads, I'm not going to take any challenges. You know how I referee, so that's not going to change from the 3 previous games I refereed you. So be aware of how I referee, and I won't accept challenges and dissent and conflict from the sideline.
Our questions come in, and I'm going to answer it now because I think it's quite relevant. Can you take advice from an umpire who is not a qualified referee? Probably a couple of things on that question. All of your umpires should have did the LGFA umpire training course, which makes them qualified. The second thing is, I wouldn't take advice if they see something from it, but they're telling you, your umpire should be telling you what exactly they see. It's up to you then to give the sanction. So the umpire shouldn't be saying, right, Stephen, that was a red card offence. He should be saying, Stephen, number 6 yellow, struck 2 blue. Or your umpire's job is to tell you exactly what you see. In terms of rules, it's your job to know the knowledge of the rule. And that's why I would make sure you consult with your umpires and your team, but you're asking for facts of them. Rather than anything else. Not, oh, well, you shouldn't be going down and saying to your umpire, oh, is that a red or is that a yellow? You know, you're looking for the facts, then you make the decision. Would you agree with that, Stephen?
Yeah, I would go in and saying, look, number 2 made a high tackle there, lads. Do you think it was deliberate or just clumsy? Yeah. Because that's the difference between a yellow and a red. You know, I would have my own opinion, but I would ask them, you know, because I'd be maybe unsure, was it just clumsy, or was it, and ask them that. The same thing is, look, lads, yeah, call me in and tell me exactly what you see. A bit like what I was saying earlier about when you put it in your report, gain for them, you know, not what they thought they saw, what they exactly saw. And, you know, again, we have that agreement is divide the pitch into 4 and you keep that quarter. And you see what's within that court. And if I need to come in, both these go to the goal flag and we'll have that discussion there. But my what I would say, probably my best 4 umpires, or sorry, my more experienced umpires, none of them are referees. They've all done a bit of coaching and they came through the club with me at different coaches at different levels, and I brought them into the umpiring side. I have referees who do umpire with me, but my 4 most experienced umpires would not be referees, and they wouldn't know the rules as such. They would know what fouls had happened, but they wouldn't have a huge knowledge of rules, but they know when something is wrong and would bring it to my attention. But we would have that discussion going to the game, what to look out for. We'd have that discussion at halftime. Lads, what are we missing out there? And at full time, what did we miss out there? Like, we never go into the changing room and say, well, was that a good game? Or, provoke a debate. What did we miss out there? How can we improve on that game, lads? If you go in and say, well, how was that? Oh, you did well, because that's what you want to hear, and that's what they're going to say. But what you really want to hear is, well, actually, Stephen, we felt number 2 was persistent fouling and you didn't deal with it.
Yeah, that's how you're going to get better. So just some very quick conflict management tools. So your pitch presence, and we've touched on all these. You look good, you look tall, strong, authority, and in control. Your perception of it, that even comes down to wearing your referee kit, having an LGFA referee kit, and have your socks, shorts, jersey. You look like a referee, you're holding your presence. That can be really important in terms of controlling the game. You nearly demand respect straight away, rather than turning up in track bottoms and a hoodie and them going, look at this lad out here, he hasn't a clue. He doesn't even have a referee's kit on. We talked about your voice. Your tone's really important. Firm, loud, but not challenging. Be aware of how you sound. Be aware of what you say and how you say it, and the impact that has. And your body language, your eye contact, be approachable and look in control. They're really key aspects that if you get right, you'll solve the conflict, and they're good to have in your toolbox as a referee to solve any issues that come your way. The one that people don't often talk about is the whistle. The importance of the tone and the volume and the length of your whistle controlling the game. Like, how highly would you rate that, Stephen, in terms of using the whistle?
That's all they listen to. That's what controls the game. As soon as you're out on that pitch, 15 minutes beforehand, you're blowing the whistle for the captains to come for the toss. You're blowing the whistle for the team sheets to come, and right away people saying, oh, this guy knows what he's at, and it's the 15 minutes, not running around the pitch at 7:05 for 7 o'clock throw-in. It's being there 15 minutes beforehand and getting all your administration done before the game starts. And the whistle tells players when they're wanted and when they need to be out on the pitch. And when I'm doing like the grab your whistle or the youth referee program or the Go games with the younger referees, I always talk about a loud whistle, because that's what controls the game. You mightn't have to say a word as long as you have a loud whistle.
And it's so important to practice. I know that sounds crazy, even practice blowing your whistle, blowing that control, knowing how you can control it can really benefit you moving forward. So communication is key, and I think we've covered a load of that to say it, and it's just reinforcing them points. And I want you to sink this in. Be careful with your word choice. Limit discussion. You don't want this to go on forever and ever. Short, sweet, concise, simple. Your knowledge of rules and respect go hand in hand. I believe with conflict, knowledge of a rule, if you're talking to a player on rule, that's what you're clarifying, the rule. Not, I think, I saw, you made a high tackle. A high tackle is a yellow card. That's the only thing it is in our rule book. That was a deliberate high tackle. That's a red card. Use the rule when explaining, because then they understand that you know what you're talking about. Understand communication styles, and the difference between people can cause a lot of undue stress or misunderstanding. Different people like to communicate in different ways, and different people, personalities, will react in different ways. Understanding that will help you. The difference between communication styles can often cause more agony than they really should. And I think that's a big one. Realize that there is different communication styles. Some people a game might go much more easier for you if you're using just completely non-verbals. You just let the game go. You're signaling, you're using hand gestures, maybe the eyes, and people respond to that a lot better. And then some people, and particularly girls, like to ask the question, but why? And sometimes you have to understand it'll be maybe them players that are asking you, but why? And a lot of the time it can actually be for really clear understanding. They actually want to know why. But why is that? And it's because they're trying to get it through in their heads. Okay, this is what's happening, and how do I not do it again? So don't be afraid. Sometimes when they have asked you, referee, what was that for? That you take maybe that 10 seconds to explain it, but you'll know by the tone when a player actually wants to know and when they're being sarcastic. And I think that all come down the line of it. Sorry, understanding the different styles, and as we say, between players, teams, coaches, and the interpersonal skills. As a referee, don't be afraid to try and build a bit of a relationship in terms of if you're out there refereeing in Wicklow and you're always with the same club, you know the coaches, you know the manager, greet them, say hello, show them that you're human. That can be a really easy way to actually break down the comfort call. Well, you know what, Stephen's all right, he's not a bad guy. They show a human side of you, and they might be more reluctant to do that screaming and shouting on the pitch for you. But the real big thing is, and I think in terms of communication, I can't stress it enough, the big ones are the verbal and the non-verbal. Be clear, clarify with rule, and use your signals. They will all help you keep out of conflict ways. But another big one that we don't talk often about is listening. As a referee, it's so important to actually listen and to actively be listening. Just don't be going, oh yeah, I know where you go. Actually take a bit of time and hear what they have to say. Maintain that eye contact while you are listening. Don't interrupt. Let them finish what they've got to say, and then you're clarifying. I think that's the key to listening. You've heard the message that you're trying to deliver. You're clarifying. You keep good posture throughout and a non-threatening position, not tiring off, but the shoulders are back and square. You're looking and confident. You're not towering down. You're not shadowing away from them. And you mentally rehearse situations in which you might become emotional. So you might feel charged. So something that somebody might say, how would you calm? Have you a trigger word to calm yourself again and to get back into the zone? Get back into your refereeing zone of next ball. How do I do this? But I think listening and clarifying is a really important skill around conflict, and that every referee should have in their toolbox. So we're going to do a really quick task. I know time's not in our side anymore, so I'm just going to step up through these. But I think this is important, and this is around our communication. The word but can sometimes be a really good tool to diffuse situations. So I want you to think of a phrase that could calm a potential conflict with the word but in the middle of it, but you still showing empathy from a player. You want to diffuse it using your words. So if anyone has any examples of any words or sentences they use when they sense as a referee coming down the line, if you want to share it with us, and we'll do. Stephen, is there any key phrase that you would use maybe as an example?
Well, they say number 4 would say referee, number 15's holding my arm all the time and you're not seeing it and you're giving a free against me. I'll say, number 4, I'm sorry about that. I can't see 15 pulling, but I will keep an eye out for it for future.
And that really wee easy thing, you've explained, yeah, I've listened to you. I understand that, but I haven't seen it and I'll keep an eye on it. So she's going to be right. Oh, well, he isn't just ignoring this factor here. He's actually taking that on board. I understand you might not agree, but my decision is final. Barry, I think sometimes there can be better ways of phrasing this. I think sometimes you might put a wee bit of fuel on the fire if you say my decision is final, and I would actually avoid that type of language, and I go back to the rules. Yeah, I understand that, but it was a push in the back, and you're going in with rule rather than my decision is final. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Stephen.
Yeah, it's a bit inflammatory,
Somebody,
I'm not for turning.
Somebody could spark it up.
Yeah.
It was accidental, but it's still a free. Yeah. Foul but accidental, but be more careful. So some really good examples, and I think you might want to put a couple of these into your toolbox. I appreciate that, but it was still a free. I'm sorry I didn't see that, but I'll watch out for it in the next play. I see your point, but from where I stood, it looked like it was, where I stood, it was a goal. I agree with what you're saying, but, and then you move on. So all the time the empathies, yes, I agree you were fouled, but you struck back. So there's nothing I can do here. You know, yeah, she definitely did foul you, but you struck back. And rule is both of you have to go. That may be well, but so you're always constantly, your opinion is valid, but you're using your butt to try and get the empathy across and to sort of get the situation under your control as soon as possible. Avoid the killer language, and this is really important for conflict. Avoid the how dare you, don't speak to me like that, I'm the referee, you're wrong, I'm right, don't speak to me, stop. And Stephen mentioned earlier that come over here now, number 3. You know, you're starting that fight before they've even walked towards you, their backs up. Who do you think you're talking to? You know, they're all things that we have to try and avoid because they can put fuel onto the fire. Some mental qualities required for dealing with conflict. As a referee, you must stay mentally alert. Control of your emotions, something that people don't often talk about. The referee has to control their emotions throughout the game and stay calm under pressure. They have to be confident in their ability, positive, and concentrate. Always concentrate, no matter what mistake has been made on the next ball or whatever incidents happen. You're always concentrating on what's coming in and behind you. Self-control. As a referee, self-control is hugely important. It's the ability to perform well under a variety of stress-producing circumstances. Self-control requires you to manage yourself and your emotions. You can't control what happens in games in certain situations, but that you can choose how you react, and that's self-control. You can't control if a manager's going to scream at you, but you can control your reaction. And that's really important around conflict. As the referee, you have to learn to control your actions back. You don't want to be adding anything to it. You want to try and be the peacemaker. Its self-control is based upon the relation between thoughts and emotions. We know that our state of mind influences our emotion, which in turn energizes our performance. It is important that as a referee, you keep your emotions in control during a game, no matter what the situation is. The greatest danger to official self-control are the internal or external distractions that can destroy concentration. So if someone's trying to break your concentration, you have to have mental alertness and be able to trigger yourself back in. If an incident happens, even around conflict, we have to send somebody off, you have to then zone back in and get back in and involved and ready for the next game, the next ball, all the time it comes.
With a couple of questions in there, or comments. Philip is saying, I keep up with play, and sometimes my view gets impeded. That's the empathy. Yep. And then he's saying, but if you roller, I just stood in the middle of the pitch. I think Philip, just stop it after where it gets impeded, because there is empathy there. But if you roller, I just stood in the middle of the pitch, that's giving them an argument to come back to you.
Yep. You're just causing an argument.
Yeah. Whereas the first 2 lines is definitely empathy, and that's where I would stop. Kieran is saying, should a referee apologize for making a mistake or not to a player? I don't think you should, apologize for making a mistake. I think, again, it's Kieran, it's a bit like what Philip said. Look, I didn't see it, and from where I saw it, this was my interpretation, or look, my vision was blocked by a player running in front of me. I wouldn't turn around and say, oh, actually, number 2, I shouldn't have sent you off because that actually wasn't a high tackle. It's more, or correcting your decision. Oh, you realized, oh, I gave a free, I pointed the wrong way. You correct that decision and you apologize. But I wouldn't apologize, because, again, if the manager heard that you apologize for a mistake that maybe cost them the game, then you're, again, and being a bit inflammatory with the whole discussion. Just empathize and say, sorry, from where I was standing or from where I was running, I did see a push in the back. Maybe it wasn't a push in the back from your point of view, but from when I saw it, it was a push in the back.
Yeah, I think that's it. You don't want to be caught in, I think, Kieran, the self-reflection is for you afterwards. It's when you really sit down after a game and go, okay, I really got them decisions wrong. I want to make sure I put things in place that doesn't happen to me again. That's when the real learning takes place. I don't know how much you would get out of it by apologizing, because people really don't want to hear it on the pitch at that time either. You know, it just can sometimes blow up even more on you. But you should be aware of different personality types, and I think that's important as a referee, and that their reactions might come to that, you know, the dominant and more aggressive influencer. So I just have that up there for you to be aware there is different personality types, and that can affect how people react. And just to be aware that you're going to have that in the pitch. You're going to have the loud, aggressive ones. You can probably already think about it. You can have the quiet ones. You can have somebody that's silent but deadly, you know, makes no fuss, but maybe is in there nipping somebody for the whole game. You can have people who just want to play and not get involved in any of it, but making sure you're aware that there's different personalities. Some people will blow and be really frustrated with you for 1 second, and then they come around in their own head and go, that was so irrational. So it's just being aware you're going to have a different mix of personalities when you go out onto the pitch. And there is some levels of conflict that we talk about, and informal and formal. And we have covered a lot of this. The informal conflict is more often handled quickly, less notable by others. Quick comment to a coach and player. So it's something that you can resolve by a look, a word, a quiet word as you walk past, maybe a look, a signal, maybe talking to a mentor at halftime, or, you know, at a water break really quickly and say, look, you know, that's enough, you know. That can diffuse it, and it's more informal. The formal levels of conflict are stuff that you can't diffuse. They need more attention and more skills necessary to resolve or understand what the player, coach, or official has heard or seen, and these must be reported to CODA. The formal levels of conflict are ones that have to be reported, that have moved on past, that we can't forget about, that we have to go around and move in with. So diffusing the situation.
Philip's asked the question, are you allowed to give a mentor a card? No, Philip, you don't award cards to non-playing members. You can put them in the dugout, or you can put them outside the pitch if they have another coach there and they're not involved in giving medical attention, and then you just report them under CODA. So you just say, sorry, Joe Bloggs, I'm not entertaining that abuse anymore. I give you enough warnings. Please sit in the dugout for the rest of the game, or go out behind the wire, and that's the end of it. And then you report in CODA what he said or she said to you the whole way through the game. Word for word.
Yeah. So our informal conflict, as I was saying, you're trying to diffuse the situation. Normal situations will not be stopped. Usually the game continues and you're doing it to the side. As Stephen said, a quick word, a quick chat as you run past. Use visual acknowledgements with coach or participants, and using direct eye contact. That's the informal conflict. You're resolving it there and then with maybe words and movement. Formal conflict in a referee contents, you know, most of the time, if it's a formal conflict, the game will have to be stopped. You know, there's things that will happen, and what we're saying here, and it comes back to what we actually just talked about. If it happened the way you said it did, I got it wrong. What kind of statement is that going to bring on to you in terms of formal contacts? Not admitting a mistake, not putting up a defense, not ignoring the concerns of the coach, player, parent, committee member completely. You know, how are you going to diffuse them situations in and around that? So not admitting a mistake. So a lot of the time the referee more than likely isn't going to know they made a mistake on the pitch. If you've this know after a game that you made a mistake in terms of score, for example, you know, you've missed out a goal or a point, you know, you have to admit that. You can't deny that. You can't go around going, no, it was 1-6 to 1-8, but you missed putting down, you put down a point instead of a goal, and it was actually 1-6 to 2-7. You know, there are things that I think you have to, at the end of the day afterwards, have to admit that mistake. You shouldn't be putting up a huge defense sometimes in and around it. And I've said this, if a coach or a player has asked you to clarify something, don't go ultra defensive. Sometimes if you just say, yeah, that's no problem, that's a push in the back, your 2 hands run it, or I ticked you because that's a tickable offence. A lot of the times, if you just take that time, as we said, and listen, it can go through it and you can diffuse it. However, If it happens and it doesn't, and it all blows up, it becomes formal conflict, and you have to step in once it becomes formal conflict. Once the abuse comes in, or once anything's reacted to you, you have to note that, as we've said, and reported it in and around it. Formal conflict, diffusing the situation. Do not add fuel to the fire. Your job is to get everybody calmed down. Always display proper physical demeanor, maintain good eye contact, maintain posture, listen rather than challenge, give a explanation and move forward. And this is a big one. Establish your comfort zone and avoid letting a coach in. When you're out in that pitch, be in the zone. Don't let a coach shouting steps, 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 steps affect your game. You can't do it. You can't let that. So you're going, oh God, I'm going to blow steps. They keep shouting steps. Oh my God, is my judgment off? Was that steps? Try and maintain being impartial. They're going to push for a weakness for a referee. Stay in your zone and learn to block everything else out. The only thing you should be focused on is next ball, next ball, next ball. And dealing with the conflict then, and Stephen's touched this with them and all of them, control the negative comments. So let's not try and speak back negatively. Focus on the current situation. So not on something that happened last week or 5 minutes into the game, or I'll have to give that because I missed that one earlier. Current situation, current play. Limit your remarks. If the problem is a judgment call, do not discuss it. Just get the game restarted quickly. So if you've made a call and it's a judgment call, it's one of them ones on the border, don't discuss it, move on. Because you don't want to add more. The ref hasn't a clue. Be decisive. That's a big thing. Be decisive. You've made that decision. Yes, you might make a mistake, but as I said, that's for afterwards. But be decisive about it. Don't be wishy-washy. Decisions. The strong referee put it to one side. If you make a wrong decision, you have to leave it. Think about the next ball, or it'll turn into a snowball effect. If you're not concentrating 100%, the danger is you get the next call wrong and the next call, and suddenly a panic sticks in. 2 wrong decisions can easily turn into 3, then 4, then 5. Then the game gets away from you. You must learn to reset your mind and move on. If you've made a mistake, you must learn to move on to the next ball. And that comes with time and experience and practice. It's not an easy skill to master, but it's definitely one that's worthwhile. Handling feedback after conflict. I think if your game's had conflict as a referee, you need to think about why that conflict occurred. Could I have done anything different? And what can we change to make sure it doesn't arise again? When you're getting feedback, make sure it's from a credible source, from somebody you trust and somebody who knows the rules, not just somebody who's giving their opinion for the sake of it. Ask clarifying questions. So if somebody's giving you feedback on the game or on a piece of conflict, ask. Don't just say, okay, that's okay. Say, what do you think I could have done? Why do you think that spiraled? So you're actually trying to get into the detail. It's not a personal attack. It should be using your game reflection to come over. Think of a process. Think of it as a process that you go over and you sit down, you reflect, you go through it, you learn, you come back. Determine whether it's constructive or destructive. You know, is that the right time? Is it the right feedback? Is it constructive feedback so it's good for you? Or is it destructive, just somebody chipping away at your confidence? Then you have to realize whether you take it on board or not with them simple points. Steve, I don't know if you have anything on that. I know I have.
No, definitely say self-reflect and talk to your team and say, you know, how could I avoid that, or how did that get out of control?
Yeah, I think that's the big one. And let's make it better the next day. Let's make sure it doesn't happen. I asked, and I thought this would be a good way to finish the webinar. I asked some of our national referees to give me one word. I asked them, I only wanted one word or one sentence, so some were a bit longer than others. But what if they were talking to another referee would be their top tip for dealing with conflict? And I thought this video sums it up well, so hopefully you'll enjoy it.
When dealing with conflict, don't add fuel to the fire by making unnecessary comments. Take a deep breath, stay calm, and be professional at all times.
My top tip for dealing with conflict is to deal with it early in the game, and this will help you keep control of the game from start to finish.
My top tip for dealing with conflict is the ability to remain calm. All around you might be losing their heads, but if you can make the right decision, mightn't necessarily always be the popular decision, but if you can make the right decision, it's a great asset to have.
Hi, Seamus here. My top tip for dealing with conflict is to genuinely listen to respond, not to listen to react.
Dealing with conflict. Stay calm, communicate clearly in a firm but respectful manner. However, if the problem persists, caution the player or the member of management and report accordingly.
Hi everyone, my top tips for dealing with conflict are to remain calm, make sure to keep eye contact at all times, make sure that the message you are delivering is clear and concise, and try to restart the game as quickly as possible.
I liked it. They didn't know what each other had said, and I think it's very fitting. A lot of key messages coming across, and for me, the big one, I think Johnny Murphy summed it up brilliantly. He was like, there might be madness going in all around you. Use the referee when you're dealing with conflict. Have to stay calm. You have to take that big breath. You have to think. You have to calm your mind, calm your heart, and then think of what you're going to do, how you're going to deal with this situation, and how you're going to bank it as experience. But I think keeping calm and cool and going with your decision is what's going to help you through that and help you get out the other side of it. So Stephen, I'll ask you, what's your top tip for dealing with conflict?
Yeah, it's calm and, you know, make the right decision. Like, to 50% of the people there, that decision is going to be right. To the other 50%, it's not. As Jonathan said, it might be unpopular, but it's the right decision. But it's a real rogues gallery there you have as well.
Some key take-home messages, and we are going to take any questions. So if you have any questions, we're going to fire them into the chat or the Q&A now. We'll answer them just as we wrap up. But I like the two pulling the rope. Conflict cannot survive without your participation. I think that's really important. If you don't try, I just love that. People can't fight with you if you don't fight back. You know, if you keep calm and you just listen, clarify, and move on, you're going to end the conflict before it starts, because they can't keep on fighting if you don't fight back. But stay calm, be prepared, think about situations where conflict might arise in the game and what you would do beforehand. Control what you can. You can only control so much, so control the controllables. Communicate well. Watch your language and your tone. What language are you using? What's your tone of voice like? Learn from any mistake or conflict that comes your way, and please move on from it. Use it all as a learning tool. And, you know, I think it'll help you. Hopefully you enjoyed that this evening, and hopefully you picked up one or two pieces. And if anybody has any questions, myself and Stephen are happy to answer them. But other than that, thanks very much for your participation. And Stephen, if you have anything you want to wrap up in.
No, just thanks very much for your time, and hopefully you'll be back out in the field maybe in February of next year, maybe under better conditions, as we hope. And happy Christmas.
We must be answered it all, no questions. So thanks very much, everybody. Great talking to you. Have a great evening and happy Christmas if we don't see you all before. Bye.
Bye, everyone.